let's get into some Ohio State takeaways from this. Since their season's done, we'll obviously talk about Georgia moving into next week as they'll face TCU in the national championship game. So as we kind of button up Ohio State's season, what do we take away from this game for them? Well, I think in large part you have to understand what they were facing both across from them in the game, in the Peach Bowl, as well as the sentiment after the Michigan game. Listen, the vitriol was out, right? The pitchforks were out for CJ Stroud, for Ryan Day, for the program overall of like, they're soft, they can't do it, they're not nearly good enough. That's why there was some worry out there, like if they get blown out against Georgia, that could spiral in a big way. And they didn't. And it wasn't even that they held on until the end. They should have won the game. Even, by the way, I'm not saying that as like a guy that does Ohio State games. Kirby Smart said that after the game. I'm stealing his words. Those are not my words. Those are his words. So now, what do we take away for this team, this coaching staff after this season? Is it a disappointing season? Yes, wildly disappointing. Can you easily say that this was one of the 2-3 best teams in the country? Absolutely. And they just took the best team in the country in Georgia, who has been the best team for 18 months and just won the national title last year and is undefeated again this year. And they took them to the absolute brink. The absolute brink. Think of what Georgia had to do, the plays that they had to make in order to beat Ohio State. So I don't know how you can be a Buckeyes fan and not at least come away impressed with your own team. That team is absolutely on the top echelon of college football. And Ryan Day's game plan was outstanding. Like, he had them ready. He was emotional. They were attacking. He called the fake punt. He had it. He was being aggressive. He was being aggressive with guys on the field that he didn't want to be aggressive with. How about the seam route to Xavier Johnson? Like, the game plan from Ryan Day was outstanding. The play from CJ Stroud, outstanding. The line play on the offensive line was terrific. That was one area where I heard a lot of people say Georgia's going to blow them up. They don't have the offensive or defensive line to hold up with Georgia. And they did. And they did. And they did for the better part of that entire game. Where were their liabilities? Well, the liabilities came in with depth issues, mainly because all of their starters on the skill positions were out except for Fleming and Ibuka. So you're missing Cade Stover, you're missing Travion Henderson, you're missing Mayan Williams, you're missing Jackson Smith and Jigba, and you're missing Marvin Harrison Jr. That's tough, right? That's a tough 15 minutes of football when you're staring at Jalen Carter and the Georgia Bulldogs, right? That's just call a spade a spade. So they struggle with depth, and then they struggle in the secondary. This is a secondary that has been average in the last year or two. And part of the issue is that they've lost some recruiting battles. They've had guys get flipped on them late in recruiting cycles. And then they had a lot of transfers, so they just don't have a ton of depth. And those guys played poorly for the most part in big moments, giving up huge plays to Michigan and then huge plays to Georgia. You can't fall down. Like, I hate that for all those kids, but they've got to get better in the secondary. I don't know how quick that fix is, but they've got to get better in the secondary. And then the last thing for Ohio State is they can struggle converting red zone trips into touchdowns. You get into some of those big moments. They struggled against Oregon last year and lost the game. They struggled against Michigan last year and lost the game. Then they struggled against Michigan this year, lost the game. And then they struggled again on Saturday night and ended up losing the game. So the fact that in the fourth quarter, Georgia could convert their scoring opportunities to touchdowns and Ohio State couldn't, that ended up being the difference in the game after Harrison exited getting knocked out. So that's the way I feel about that. And the last thing I would say about this team is that there's two individuals that received far too much criticism, at least in my view, after the Michigan game, and that was CJ Stroud and Ryan Day. Those two guys were phenomenal on Saturday night. Ryan Day called a fake punt against Michigan, would have changed the entire game. Snapper didn't snap it to the up back. Called another fake punt in this game in the semifinal. would have totally changed the dynamic of that game. 8:58 up 11, you get a free first down right there, changes that game totally. And so I don't want to hear it from Ohio State fans like, he's too conservative. Too conservative? Like, pound sand, get out of here. He called 2 fake punts. They didn't work out. That's not his fault. It's really not. Kudos to Kirby Smart for that timeout. I thought Ryan Day's performance was outstanding. I thought Georgia's coaching staff was outstanding. Again, it was a great game. CJ Stroud now, let's talk about him. Phenomenal effort. He's sitting out there with a makeshift skill group. I'm sorry, you can say that's a knock, but it's true. It's true. From what they thought they were going to have in the preseason to what they were playing with in that fourth quarter wasn't even in the same hemisphere. And Stroud is just pulling them down the field. Great run after great run, good throws, good decisions, and it didn't work out for him, okay? It didn't work out for him. And then real last thing, I don't want to hear anything about Noah Ruggles. Any college kicker trying to kick a field goal from 50 yards, I'm sorry, that's just not a high percentage kick. I would be more surprised if he makes it. So save it. If you're throwing out any social media hate towards Noah Ruggles, then, well, there's a special place and you know where for you.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoy that clip, make sure you click subscribe somewhere down here. From game highlights to exclusive interviews and rankings, we've got everything you need as a college football fan right here, College Football on Fox.